First session of the Bioenergy Community of Practice. Welcome. First session of 2021, of course. Thank you for joining. We are going to wait a couple of minutes for other colleagues to connect. Nos vamos a esperar un par de minutos para que se conecten otros colegas. Catherine, ¿puedes poner la segunda lámina? For those of you who don't speak Spanish, please remember that we have simultaneous translation. You can, in your control panel, in your screen, you can go to this button that says interpretation. So please, you can click there and then you will access the simultaneous translation. Thank you. Ahora sí, listo para empezar. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Catherine, ¿puedes, por favor, poner la primera lámina?
Hola, hola, hola.
Buenos días, bienvenidas, bienvenidos a esta primera sesión en línea del año 2021 de la Comunidad de Práctica sobre Bioenergía. Esta es una red de aprendizaje entre pares que es facilitada por la Secretaría de la Plataforma Regional de Estrategias de Desarrollo Resiliente y Bajo en Emisiones, LEDSLAC, y el Grupo de Trabajo de Energía de LEDS Global Partnership, LEDS-GP. Quisiera, antes de pasar a nuestra presentación de hoy, compartirles un poco. Varios de ustedes son miembros de la comunidad desde su inicio y conocen, por supuesto, el enfoque con el que trabajamos, pero para quienes se unen por primera vez hoy, quisiéramos comentarles que la comunidad de práctica fue lanzada en el año 2016 con el objeto de facilitar el aprendizaje y la colaboración entre pares en la región latinoamericana para avanzar en el desarrollo sostenible de la bioenergía. Catherine, no podemos ver la presentación. Gracias. Entonces, el enfoque que tenemos es el de aprendizaje en grupo, como pueden ver en el centro de este gráfico. Y a partir de el intercambio de experiencias, de conocer nuevas tecnologías, también apoyamos y aprendemos de lo que se está haciendo en los países miembros y tenemos además actividades para compartir y diseminar el conocimiento con otras redes a nivel regional y global. Entonces, para el año 2021, si puedes pasar por favor Catherine, a la siguiente lámina, las actividades que tenemos. Vamos a seguir con las sesiones en línea para diseminar información sobre tecnologías, marcos de política, modelos de negocio y herramientas para fomentar el desarrollo de la bioenergía. Ustedes en la página web que está el link abajo pueden encontrar las grabaciones de las 6 sesiones en línea que tuvimos en el año 2020. También facilitamos asistencia técnica, especialmente del Climate Help Desk, del EGP, a nuestros miembros. En este momento tenemos una asistencia en marcha empezada el año pasado para apoyar a Colombia en el desarrollo de una hoja de ruta para la NAMA de biogás. También este año vamos a compartir resultados de asistencias técnicas del año pasado, una en Guatemala, a una organización miembro, una empresa, y en Costa Rica a la Asociación Costarricense de Biogás para el fortalecimiento institucional. Pues vamos a publicar algunos testimonios y resultados de esas asistencias. Estamos también desde noviembre trabajando en Colombia, apoyando al Ministerio de Energía y Minas en un análisis de abajo hacia arriba de las barreras y las opciones de política para mejorar el desarrollo del biogás en el país. Y además estamos planificando actividades de capacitación y desarrollo de productos de conocimiento en colaboración con socios. Queríamos, antes de pasar a la presentación, porque muchas veces se nos olvida después, puedes pasar que si ustedes quieren no son parte de la comunidad de práctica y quieren serlo, si tienen alguna iniciativa, herramienta o un caso de éxito que quieran compartir, si les interesa conocer más sobre la asistencia técnica que facilitamos, o si tienen recursos, documentos, información que quieran compartir con la comunidad de práctica, por favor, escríbanle a Catherine Bocanegra, que ustedes pueden ver ahí en la pantalla, y por favor déjenos saber sobre cualquiera de estos aspectos. Ahora sí, pasamos a la presentación de hoy. Quisiera decir que, bueno, darle la bienvenida a nuestros presentadores de hoy. Ana María Guevara, del Ministerio de Energía y Recursos Naturales No Renovables. Verónica Guayanlema, del Ministerio de Ambiente y Agua y el Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo. Y Paul Melo, del Ministerio de Ambiente y Agua de Ecuador. Este es un tema que en las conversaciones que hemos tenido en el pasado, ya durante 4 años de la comunidad de práctica, es clave, y muchas veces nos concentramos en aspectos de las tecnologías, a veces de regulaciones técnicas, etcétera, pero dejamos de lado el hecho de que uno de los retos más importantes para el desarrollo de la bioenergía, quizás más que en otras fuentes renovables de energía, es la necesidad de un accionar coordinado y coherente de diferentes áreas de política pública, ¿verdad? No es solo la política energética, la política ambiental, sino que tiene que ver, pues, energía, tienen que ver los gobiernos locales que manejan el tema de desechos sólidos. Entonces, este tema de la coordinación interinstitucional es clave, y conociendo el esfuerzo que están haciendo en Ecuador en el marco del desarrollo de su NDC, entonces hemos invitado a los colegas del Ministerio de Energía y Recursos Naturales No Renovables y del Ministerio de Ambiente, que con el apoyo del PNUD están conduciendo esta mesa técnica interinstitucional sobre bioenergía en Ecuador. Entonces quisiera darles la bienvenida y darles el micrófono a los colegas. Quisiera decirles que después de la presentación vamos a tener un espacio para que ustedes puedan hacer preguntas, puedan compartir experiencias de sus propios países, cuáles son los retos que están teniendo en este tema y que pues podemos abrirle los micrófonos para que ustedes puedan preguntar, comentar y entonces tengamos una discusión muy activa. Por ahora, dejo con ustedes, entiendo que empieza Ana María. Adelante, por favor, y muchas gracias
Start.
por que se han
It's
unido
Ana
mientras
María,
en esta introducción.
and thank you for participating. Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pablo Melo from the Ministry of the Environment and Water in Ecuador. Thank you for the invitation so we can share a bit of our work that we've done in Ecuador. We have been coordinating this work with the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. And regarding bioenergy, what we're going to present today is going to be a bit of the background, the work that we have developed with this bioenergy working group, and also what can we expect regarding the work of this team. A bit of background. In the year 2014, we had an event with the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Agriculture. They review all the topics that were of interest of all the institutions, and within these activities we managed to execute a project with government investment. It was a project to take advantage of livestock waste for energy. This project wanted to strengthen the capabilities of small farmers and small farming association in order to use the solid waste for energy. We also developed a basic and an advanced manual for the use of these waste, and we also had an implementation phase. We managed to set up 6 biodigesters, 5 in the province of El Oro and 1 in Santo Domingo. These were pilot projects to use solid waste for energy. Once the Ecuador ratified the Paris Agreement and with the work of this group, we started to prioritize this topic because in the process we work with different stakeholders for mitigation, obviously from the Energy Department, Agriculture Department, Solid Waste Management. So the stakeholders identified that many of the actions within their sectors, these actions had implications in other departments. So we started working together in bioenergy. So this was a comprehensive program, and we've been working in this direction with the different stakeholders. Since 2019, we decided to work in something more specific in the bioenergy project, and we set up the bioenergy working group. This was enacted. This has the support of the Ministry of the Environment. From there, we have been working in some workshops with different objectives that Ana Maria is going to share. Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning. I'm Ana Maria Guevara. I work in the Territory Subsecretariat from the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. I'm going to present the work of the Bioenergy Working Group, what are the objectives, and then Veronica is going to explain about the specific actions that were executed. As Paul was saying, from 2018, where we identified we to combine all these stakeholders. This process lasted until 2019, and it was officialized in this working group, this Bioenergy working group. And we were assessing these stakeholders. We identified that the Ministry of Energy is the ruling entity regarding energy policies and is involved in the development of public policies regarding biomass, biofuels, and biogas. We were able to define that this was the appropriate entity to lead this project and this working group. Obviously, with the support of the Ministry of the Environment and Water, who is the leading stakeholder in the climate agenda, and also with the support of the UNCEP program from the UNDP. Obviously, their support is very important. When we assess different projects that we identified for bioenergy in Ecuador, we identify other stakeholders that we wanted to relate to our working group. Among these were the Ministry of the Production, Foreign Trade, and the Ministry of Agriculture. These four institutions are the pillars of this working group, and once we started working with them, we identified more stakeholders for project development, for regulation development, and actions for bioenergy. Here we have research institutions. We have the National Institute of Livestock Research, also the National Electrical Corporation. They have been developing some research projects for biomass. We also work with the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation for Agriculture, the Bariloche Foundation, and also, like I said, with the support of the UNDP. From there, we started to identify our main objectives within the framework of the current public policies on energy and the environment, and which was the climate agenda for the country. And we identified a main objective, which is identify enabling measures. We had four main measures: regulation, market, financing, and articulation of the different stakeholders of the public and private sector. And these measures are the ones who enable the productive activities in order to generate new value chains and have a commercial impact with a focus on sustainable development, and obviously focused on complying with the climate goals. Within the specific objectives of the group, we wanted to coordinate public and private efforts in order to develop the National Bioenergy Program. It's important that we share with you that during this work, during the first meetings of this working group, we identified that in the country we had a series of efforts and projects that were scattered among the public and private sector. And the idea of this working group was identify this scattered effort and bring them together into this bioenergy national program. This is what the working group wants to develop. We also wanted to promote the use of the solid waste for energy. It's important to highlight that the market, financing, and regulation issues are very important to promote this use. And this is something that we are focusing on in this working group, especially in this moment that we're working in the regulation and finances issues. These are two topics that we are working on very hardly. And finally, this working group considers the sustainable and development uh, very important for biodiversity. These working groups wants to identify priority impactful actions that contribute to the nationally determined contributions and that collaborate with the climate agenda of the country so we can guarantee food security, sustainable development, and biodiversity conservation. Now I will leave you with Veronica so she can explain a bit about the more specific actions from since
Muchas gracias, Ana
2019.
María. Buenos días a
Thank you,
todos.
Ana
Soy
María.
Oyeleme,
Good
especialista
morning,
financiera, y yo les voy
everyone.
a hablar
I'm
un poco.
Veronica Oyeleme.
En esta ocasión y en esta sección yo les voy a hablar un poco de la
Now I'm
estrategia de
going to talk a
desaparición
bit about
ilegal de trabajo.
what we've gone through in
Bueno,
this
como
last
fue
year.
mencionado, nosotros
As it was
tenemos una
mentioned,
metodología para trabajar con las
we
instituciones.
have a methodology to
Teníamos
work with the
definido de que
institutions. We
compartíamos
have some
información
working
con
groups
ellas,
where we share
pero nos hemos
information
dedicado
and
a seguir
experiences
avanzando. El
and
objetivo de este
we
grupo es
move on.
compartir la información
The aim of
y
these
avanzar
working groups is to share
de
information
acuerdo a una planificación que nos hemos establecido.
and
Como
we
fue
follow
mencionado,
a plan. As we
empezamos la
mentioned,
estrategia a finales del 2019
by the
y en
end
enero
of
del 2019
2019, we resumed this
la
working
primera
group,
mesa de
and
bioenergía.
then
En
we
esta
had the
mesa
first roundtable
se
of
realizó una
bioenergy.
socialización
The
con
aim
información de la mesa interinstitucional y a la
was
vez también
to
lograr con los actores poder
set
identificar
up this
de qué
working group
manera
and
podrían
identify the
los
barriers and
temas de la energía tener que
opportunities
atravesar.
for
La
bioenergy.
identificación de barreras y oportunidades ha sido
This
hecha
identification of barriers and opportunities
institucional
was
y
done in
también a
the
la vez poder
institutional,
conocer
political, and
las
technical
siguientes
aspects.
oportunidades, los siguientes desafíos que tenemos que atravesar y que cada uno desde su institución pueda aportar.
We have
En este
some
sentido, la identificación de actores ha sido muy
other
importante.
objectives.
Contar
For
con la
that,
participación del sector
identifying the
privado,
stakeholders was very
ya que
important.
ellos
The
funcionan
private sector was very important since
asimismo
they
desarrollados
already
desarrollo
have
de
actions,
replicabilidad es otro de los retos que también la mesa ha podido identificar.
but they weren't
Y
replied by the
algo muy
public sector.
importante es mantener el
And
compromiso de
one
todos.
important
Esto
result
es
is
poder
to
seguir
maintain the
dialogando con
commitment
la
to work
totalidad
together.
de los actores,
We
tanto
wanted
las
to get a
transversales
commitment
como
from
las
all the
áreas y
stakeholders
también el desarrollo de las mismas.
so we can carry out activities.
Si bien la primera mesa fue
The
bastante un
first
poco de
table
exposición,
was about
explicando los
setting
objetivos
up and explaining the
en una
objectives.
segunda mesa es donde ya trabajamos
On
en el desarrollo y en
a
la
second
definición de lo que es el
table, we
roadmap
worked
para la
on the
realización
definition of our
nacional de
roadmap
esta.
for the
Entonces,
National Bioenergy
como primeros
Program.
pasos, lo que se buscó
As
es
a first steps, what we
establecer que
wanted
ya se
to
haga un avance
was to focus on
de
actions that
implementación,
already had
viabilidad o factibilidad,
some
que ya
work
contemos con información que sea
where we already
realizable
had
con la
solid
institución.
information
En
that
esto fue
could be
importante que
considered.
hemos integrado al sector privado
We
a
have
través de
integrated the private
agreements.
sector
Ellos han sabido
through
manifestar su interés
clean
en
production
solucionar
agreements.
problemas al rato de implementar acciones que son
They
muy
share their
importantes
interest,
y nos han permitido nosotros también
and
conocer cuál es el estado de esta
we
situación
have been able to
frente al
know
específico
about the status of this project and about the energy potential of Ecuador. And also we have identified research opportunities that can be used for a continuous work. The UNDP, the Ministry of Energy, and the Ministry of the Environment have committed to provide technical support to assess this information and to present the work that we're going to develop. In this first roadmap, we wanted to have three lines of actions: biogas, biomass from solid waste, and fuel. These were the main projects identified in Ecuador. However, in a third table, we wanted to define the scope of the lines of work. It was important to define the scope because bioenergy is a very wide topic, and we realized that we needed to focus on three working axes. We have regulation, the market, and funding. In regulation, it was crucial to identify all the regulation that could be improved or all the regulation needed. Regarding the market, it was necessary to include the private sector and look for market research, especially for the solid biomass use. This has a very high potential in Ecuador, according to the bioenergy studies. And finally, regarding the funding, a lot of initiatives and the clean production agreements were hard to fund. At that time, we didn't develop the green funds. Since we were members of the NDC partnership, we were able to access a technical support sessions in order to use waste from small farms that could generate electrical energy. On table number 4, we presented results regarding a regulation. This needs to be reviewed and improved. The regulation in Ecuador is not very specific regarding bioenergy, and that's something important that needs to be considered. Even though we mentioned renewable energy, we haven't prioritized bioenergy. So the next step that we want to take is to get more specific, to know what specific regulation do we need. We don't need to write a bill that takes a lot of time. We need to have a more quick process. Also, environmental regulation is very important. It's very important, and we see an opportunity here. And what we want is to have simplified mechanisms so the NDC initiatives can be implemented. We identified the economic incentives so that these projects could be developed. And as the next point, we have a presentation of business meetings. This was by the end of 2020. We had the first climate business meeting where we had projects that needed funding, and we have reached very interesting agreements. One of them is the production of chips and pellets to generate energy. This was funded by the private banking industries. We also
principalmente en este momento residuos
wanted to have
sólidos
market research about the
las
solid waste use for energy.
se sigan conectando y lo que buscamos es
And
poder seguir
what we want is to keep integrating the different projects.
por la mesa interinstitucional de bioenergía. Como ya les hemos
The
mencionado,
initiatives, as I said, well, we have already a market research for the use of forest waste, especially from the teca, that it's a very interesting crop with a high potential. Also, we have a concept note for a farm, small and medium farms, and we also have identified the enabling regulation for incentives, but we wanted to get more specific. So this could be implemented in the short term. This is the story that we have gone through. Now we're going to see the next steps. Thank you, Veronica and Ana Maria. Regarding next steps of this bioenergy working group, as it was mentioned, even though we have some studies, it's very important to have specific regulation. We still have to have the mechanisms in the ministries and have some resolutions so we can get this regulation so we can keep working on these guidelines. Also, regarding the funding of bioenergy projects, we already have a project portfolio, and obviously this is going to be hard if we don't have the resources or the incentives. As Veronica mentioned, through international cooperation, we've been able to apply and search for funding. The business meetings that we developed were an opportunity in order to identify the funding opportunities to implement these initiatives. It haven't been easy, but we think the interest that we've generated has been important, and we're going to keep working on them. This is the experience from Ecuador, and we are available for any question. Thank you and congratulations for this presentation. Thank you for and Paul, as you said, like you said, this isn't easy, but it's crucial. One of the things that we see during all these years in the region is that, well, as you said, there are a lot of scattered efforts, and the challenge is how can we combine them or bring them together so we can consolidate them. So we can use all these development potential of bioenergy. So thank you for sharing your experience, and I wish you nothing by success in these next steps and in bioenergy in general in Ecuador. I would like to welcome to Alex Ott. He is the Community of Practice Coordinator from Let's GP. I would like to know if there's any comment or questions. There's a question about access to the presentation. Well, of course, we're going to share the video and the presentation on the Community of Practice website. And there you're going to be able to find these and past sessions. So if there's any question, you can raise your hand, or you can also send your question through the chat. Or if anyone want to comment about the challenges that they face in their own country. Is there any question? I have a question. How are you relating the subnational and local governments that have regulatory roles regarding the management of solid waste? How involved they are in this working group, and how are you coordinated with them? Thank you, Ana Maria, for your question. Besides the work that we do in this interinstitutional working group, we have this space that brings stakeholders from the different levels of government. We've tried to bring national and local stakeholders. In the case of solid waste management, this is in charge of the local governments, the municipalities here in Ecuador. So what we want, obviously, by identifying these needs that we mentioned, we try to bring together these stakeholders to have a bottom-up regulation. Thank you, Paul. We have a raised hand from Juan Pablo Rojas. You can activate your mic, please. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, welcome. I'm Juan Pablo Rojas from the Costa Rican Association of Biogas. It's a pleasure to be here. The presentation was very interesting, and I have a question because we have worked a lot about this in Costa Rica regarding bringing together the different stakeholders, because we not only need political coordination, but there are other stakeholders such as academia. How are you working to bring academia into this process? Well, we've tried to reach to academia into their working groups. Maybe you can comment a bit about that.
Introducción al respecto, no sé si es que igual Ana María o Verónica también quieran
Yes,
complementar.
maybe Ana Maria and Veronica want to say something as well, but the opportunity that we saw regarding climate change was identify the different stakeholders from different areas. We had people from the public and private sector, also from academia and from international cooperation. So having been able to bring together all the stakeholders enabled us to identify the work that each of us is doing. As Ana Maria mentioned, we realized that there's a lot of scattered efforts, and this could be complemented with each other in this working group in order to bring down the barriers and generate support. Within our structure, we have sectorial working groups. This can include people from the public and private sector and also people from academia for research. I don't know if Ana Maria or Veronica
Yo
want
quisiera
to say something.
comentar que, bueno, desde la experiencia
Well,
de
from
lo que fue la participación del Ministerio de
the
Energía
experience from the Ministry of
la
Energy
distribución nacional de
in
terminación,
the working
fue
groups
una
about
experiencia muy
the
importante de articulación de actores, identificación de
NDCs,
estas líneas de trabajo y de proyectos,
well, we've
como
identified
tener una
these
visión
lines of work
inicial
in
de
order to
cuáles
have
eran
an
las
initial
actividades
view
diversas que teníamos
of
dentro del
these
sector
scattered
y
efforts
ello
that we had.
articular a la
And
academia y a
I
los
think
procesos de investigación
by, by
desde
including
la
academia
identificación de sus proyectos,
and
generamos
identifying their projects,
los
well, this
tú
generates
puedes
more
identificar que se
engagement.
está desarrollando un proyecto de
If you
investigación
identify that there's a
en un
research
sector o
project
actor en específico y puedes vincularlo a tu
and
mesa
you can relay this
y
to your
identificar las
working
barreras y
group
las necesidades
and
que tiene
identify the barriers and
la
needs,
coordinación interinstitucional de la mesa, una
you
posible
can
oportunidad
offer a
de algunos
possible
aspectos técnicos,
opportunity
de financiamiento,
regarding
etcétera,
technical, regulatory
comunicarlos
aspects, etc.
para que
Well, you can relate
sea
them so
complementativo,
they
digamos, con el trabajo
are
de
more
la mesa. Y de
engaged
esta forma,
with
vas como
our
encontrando
work.
actores que no solamente son actores
So
del
there are
sector
stakeholders that are not
de
only
la
from the
academia,
public sector, but also
sino
from
también
academia that can be
Verónica.
joined into this working group.
Gracias. Yo también igual quería adicionar algo. Me parece súper interesante lo que
Yes, I
comentas
think
porque realmente
the
estamos
question is
viviendo
very
en
interesting
una política
because
súper cambiante. La
we
academia
are
está
in a country
cambiando
where
muchísimo
politics
y
are
eso a
changing all the
veces el
time.
conocimiento y lo que
So
hemos
academia are the
podido
ones who keep the
e
knowledge.
integrarle en los procesos
So we have
participativos y en los procesos
integrated
de política
them
pública
into the
y también
public policy
involucrarles en estudios, ¿no? Integrar
processes.
estudios a la par
And
también
we've
estos
also
proyectos de las mesas de trabajo
integrated the
y realizar
research.
ciertas capacitaciones en donde
We've had
academia
certain
comparte sus
training
experiencias
sessions
y
where
demás
academia shared their
junto a
knowledge.
los ministerios. Tuvimos una
And we've
capacitación en el
also
tema de
had some knowledge
costos
transfer
y
for the
también
ministries.
los resultados del programa de biodigestores que se compartió con el Ministerio de
We
Energía
also share some
de
results of
los
several programs with the
aprendizajes que
Ministry
hemos
of
tenido
Energy.
tanto
So
los ministerios como la misma
the
academia
ministries and the academia
participantes
has
que ahora se han
benefited
integrado
from
con
this
nosotros,
process,
nos
and
comentan y
now
nos mantienen al
they
tanto de los
are
proyectos que van avanzando y también les
letting
permitimos
us know about their projects, and they have developed a new
seguir,
project. So
seguir
it's a
dándoles esta
very
continuidad
interesting to
y mencionarles
keep
también
offering these
que otro sector
opportunities.
importante ha sido el privado
And
y el
another
empresarial,
important sector was the
invitarles
private
a que
sectors. We've
participen
tried
en
to
temas específicos.
invite
Digamos, en el
them
anterior, la última
to
sesión,
specific
quisiéramos,
meetings.
no recuerdo exactamente,
I
pudimos
think it
contar
was
con la
the
participación
third one where we
de
had
agencias en las cuales nos presentaban proyectos
experiences from the private
entonces
sector.
ha sido muy enriquecedor
So
también
this was
contarles
very enlightening
lo que
having
buscamos
these
dentro de nuestra
stakeholders.
temática, irles integrando un
What we
poco más
want is
dentro de las
to
mesas.
get them
Muchas
joined
gracias
in to
a
these
todos por
tables.
esa respuesta.
Thank you for
Interesante
your
porque también en
answers.
la comunidad
They
de
were very
práctica
interesting
tenemos
because in
artistas
the community of
representando
practice, we have
organizaciones académicas
representatives
y
from
técnicas
academic
que
and
obviamente
technical
tienen interés
organizations
en contribuir en
that
estos
are going to
procesos
be
nacionales en
interested
sus
in
respectivos países. Y a
contributing
modo
with these
de
national efforts
introduccional,
in their
quisiera darle la
countries.
palabra
And
a Aida
now
Lorenzo,
I'm gonna
miembro de la comunidad
give the floor to Aida
guatemala
Lorenzo.
de la Asociación
She's a
de
member of the community of
Renovables de
practice
Guatemala.
from
Aida,
Guatemala.
adelante, por favor.
Aida, please go
Buenos
ahead.
días a todos, qué gusto estar acá, gracias por esta
Good
oportunidad.
morning.
Realmente
Thank you
nos
for the
gusta mucho Ecuador
opportunity.
y compartir un
Congratulations
poco sobre
to
lo que
Ecuador.
en ese tema donde el Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía
They are an
está
example, and the Ministry of Energy and Mines are leading this process. I feel identified. You're working since 2014. You just took step by step. So I feel very identified. So I would like to say or to share what we're working here in Guatemala. I'm the coordinator of the mitigation group. Central America, and this is like an EPCC, but from Guatemala. This group is formed by academia, research institutions, and they invite different associations and the private sector. I'm in the mitigation group, and what we're trying to do is the same as you. And this requires a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I like a lot that you are the ones who lead this working group. In our case, we have the participation of the Ministry of the Environment. And what we're trying to do in Guatemala, well, we still have a long way to go, but we have a lead strategy. This was presented 2 years ago by the previous administration. The new administration has continued, and we had 43 strategies for climate change mitigation. These were multi-sectorial, and the idea that we have now is to resume these strategies. I love the idea of having a bioenergy working group, because what we're trying to do is that through the defined strategies, we want to form working groups and roadmaps. Because we realize that only academia cannot move forward, only the public sector cannot move forward. So we need to join efforts. We have two people from the Ministry of the Environment. But the public entity is the one who needs to lead this project with the support of the academia. But as I said, I would like to congratulate you. I work in liquid biofuels, and I think that we should keep in touch. And thank you for this session, Ana Maria, because this is the objective of the community, to learn from each other. So thank you very much. Thank you, Aida. What I was going to say was that the role of the community of practice is to facilitate learning and also facilitate introductions among the members. And also we have some bilateral exchanges. So maybe if you in Guatemala want to know more about Ecuador, we can set up a bilateral session so you can exchange information. Also, Juan Pablo.
Igualmente, pues podemos organizar
We can, as I said, we can set up these exchanges in Guatemala. For example, there's a pilot program is the introduction of ethanol in gasoline. Well, we had this discussed in an event last year, but we can have these bilateral sessions. So, Aida, I hope that you can move forward with your project in Guatemala. We still have 10 minutes. We try to keep the sessions under 1 hour in order to share about the specific experiences. I don't know if there's any more questions or comments.
manos levantadas.
I don't see any raised hands.
Pero Juan Pablo, adelante, puede abrir su
But
micrófono.
Juan Pablo, you can open your mic.
Encender su cámara si quiere también, Juan Pablo, para que lo veamos.
You can activate your camera if you want.
Nosotros, la pregunta es porque nosotros aquí en Costa Rica estamos exactamente en eso, ¿verdad? En cómo poder dar los siguientes pasos y estamos integrando, tratando de
Well,
integrar.
we want to give the next steps in Costa Rica, and we're trying to integrate the technology part. So one of the things that we do was going to the universities so they can do their work.
Hagan laboratorios que generen lo que se necesita, ¿verdad? No necesariamente investigación básica ahora, ¿verdad? Pero
Well, we said to them what we need is to integrate this with the companies.
buscando es exactamente eso. Es un laboratorio que se encargue de darle servicio a las industrias que están interesadas en bioenergía.
So there's a lab that is been forming.
Esa es una de las cosas que estamos muy interesados en cómo ir desarrollando, ¿verdad? Para ya poder
We're very interested in and develop this in order to affect public policies, and we are
arriba, hacia abajo y hacerlo
trying to have a
poder hacerlo realmente. ¿Cuál esa integración de actores?
bottom-down
Los recursos son muy
approach.
es cómo poder realmente hacerlo posible y dónde se quiere tocar y cómo eso es lo que realmente quería saber más sobre cómo lo están haciendo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Juan Pablo.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo, and I wish you success on your projects. And if we can support in any way, well, let us know and we can discuss it.
Quisiera darles unos minutos ya a los colegas de
I would
Ecuador.
like to give the floor to our colleagues from Ecuador. Oh, we have Gabriela Garces.
Adelante.
Go ahead.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Un gusto poder unirme un rato y escuchar.
It was a pleasure to participate in listening to your presentation. I'm Gabriela Garces from Peru. I'm an environmental consultant,
También actualmente soy investigadora
and I'm also a researcher in the Stuttgart University in Germany. I lived for a few years in Costa Rica. I met Ana Maria Majano, and as a Peruvian,
los avances en nuestra región. Tenía una consulta porque se mencionó sobre una cartera de proyectos.
I had a question because we have a project portfolio that are looking for a funding. So I would like to ask what type of mechanisms and do you use to assess the feasibility of the project regarding sustainability? Is there any harmonization of these guidelines to ensure that the projects that are going to be funded comply with the sustainability guidelines?
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Gabriela. Verónica, ¿responde? ¿Quién responde?
Sí, yo quería un poco contar nuestra experiencia, como nosotros les mencionamos del año anterior.
As we mentioned last year, we had the first business meetings, and the bioenergy projects had a bit of advantage. Almost 30% were projects of bioenergy. What we requested from the projects from the private sector and academia was that they need to focus to contribute with the NDCs. They needed to be involved with the climate change, not only about energy, but these needed to have high benefits, and that each of these projects were presented to the private banking sector. In Ecuador, we consolidated the green credits, and we have the participation of several banks. They had their own conditions, but we had these green credits with lower interest rates, with shorter times. And what we wanted was to create these meetings
para que puedan ser estos puedan acceder a este financiamiento, y es de aquí que
access to this funding, and we had one or two projects that are going to be funded in order to be implemented. We wanted to provide the climate change approach.
Por lo que es importante que se pueda gestionar este financiamiento.
Muchas gracias, Verónica.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Verónica.
Gabriela, un gusto verla.
And welcome, Gabriela. It's nice to see you. Now, please, Paul, Ana Maria, Verónica, can you share in 1 minute any recommendation or any lessons learned that we need to take into account in promoting the coordinations among different stakeholders? So let's start with Verónica. Well, I think a lesson learned was that nothing is static, everything is dynamic. At first, we have a very big dream, but knowing the different experience from the sector, we have been landing the objectives. So I think with that, we're going to be more clear on the objective. We need to be open to change. The challenge is to keep moving forward and not quitting. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ana Maria. To identify the stakeholders and bring them together so each of them can share their perspective, their needs, or their opportunities. Well, I think this was the best lesson that we've had. Let them know, and how can we bring more stakeholders to achieve this articulation was very important. And as Veronica said, we wanted to support their initiatives so we can all benefit, because these actions are in the benefit of the country. Thank you, Paul. Ana Maria? Well, I think that as a recommendation for the different participants is that we need to use these interinstitutional spaces that we have within the energy and environmental policies. We need to use these spaces where we have all the stakeholders together in order to generate commitments for future projects. Being able to work together in the elaboration of our nationally determined contribution, it generates a dynamic for the other sectors, and that way it makes it easier to plan future projects. And also we need to determine focal points, so we work with the same stakeholders, because it's hard to get all these stakeholders together. So we need to have a specific focal points, and this makes the work easier. Thank you very much. Thank you to the three of you and your institutions for sharing these experiences and challenges that you face. I wish you success. Thank you to all the participants. We've had a very good discussion regarding what's happened in other countries, in Guatemala, Costa Rica. We would like to invite you to join this community of practice. You can write to Catherine Bocanegra. Catherine, could you go to the last slide so we can all see your email address? And as I said, if you have any experience or resources or trainings to announce, you can reach to us so we can share them with the members of the community of practice and our lists. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in future activities of the community of practice. Have a nice day.
Hasta luego.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias.
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 Buen día.
Que pasen bien.
Buen día para todos.
Esté muy bien.